So today I'd like to share a teaching on forgiveness from one of my teachers, my mentor, Ken Cloke, who's a professional mediator and arbitrator, and really a spiritual teacher, though he doesn't advertise that. And it's a 5-step forgiveness process, but there's a lot of hidden steps in there. So it always seems simple at the beginning. Of course, it never really is in the end. And so it's just so true, right? So what's good about this process? There's a lot of things that are hard about this, so I'm going to start with the easy, good things. What's good about it is the only person involved is yourself. You don't need the other person involved or the other situation, so that makes it easy. And Ken Cloke, like I said, he's a mediator, but really he's a teacher in this tradition that I call conflict transformation or conflict revolution. And it's a long tradition that goes back to Martin Luther King and Gandhi and some ancient philosophers even before them. So just to start us off, I want to share this quote from Gandhi that I looked up about forgiveness. And he says, "Forgiveness is the quality of the brave, not of the cowardly. The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong." So just remember that. Forgiveness is the quality of the brave. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. Go back to that. All right. But one more note. Before I unwrap this little gift that Ken has given us, I want to share the difference in terms of how he uses the words between forgiveness and reconciliation. So forgiveness is an internal process, according to Ken, that changes how we are with ourselves in relationship to something that happened in the past. It does not require reestablishing a relationship or being in a relationship with the person involved. Right? Reconciliation is a step further than forgiveness that involves reestablishing a relationship. So let's say we played a lot of racquetball together, and when I'm losing the racquetball game, I get mad and I hit you with the racket. We stop the game, and you're like, "Hey, you just hit me with the racket," and I'm like, "All right, I'm sorry. Could we keep playing?" And you're like, "Okay, we can keep playing." Keep playing. I start losing again. I hit you with the racket again. Stop. Same whole thing. Things happens again, and then you take a moment. Maybe you go through this whole process. You decide to forgive me, and you're like, "I'm not playing with you anymore," right? Because I know you're probably going to hit me again. So that is in the racquetball context. That is forgiveness without reconciliation, right? Like we're not going to play more games together, and that might be really the smart thing to do, right? So it's funny, I hope, but the point is, it's not just because you forgive, you got to go back to the bad situation, right? That's important, because I don't want to I don't want to come across that there's any kind of spiritual benefit in continuing to suffer unnecessarily, right? And if you've had experiences like that, you know what I mean. So, okay, in order to do this 5-step process, you need to think about an experience that could use some forgiveness in your life. So it's easier because we love being the center of the story. We love being the good guy. It's easier to think about something where someone mistreated you than where you mistreated someone else. Start with the easy thing. So if you can imagine that, just right now, take a moment. Maybe that's never happened in your life, and that's awesome. And then you can just go back to my racquetball example because you can't come up with one from your own life. But I bet you can. Yeah. So just take a minute, and if you don't have that in mind, this whole process will be very abstract, and you won't get as much out of it. So if you have that in mind, it'll help. All right. 5-step process. So step 1 is to remember what happened. Remember what happened. There's 2 parts. There's remembering, you could say, externally and internally, or objectively and subjectively. So you remember what happened. One is like what happened in the outside world. And I'll just use the racquetball example because it's in our heads. What someone else would have seen is one person hit another person with the racket or the racquetball or whatever version of the story is. It's more fun. But the internal experience, someone wouldn't have seen. That would have been your pain, your internal, like physical pain in your back. It would have been your surprise, your disappointment, the sense of a broken code or covenant between the two of you. All of the really, I mean, usually it's like the more painful things are what people can't see. So you have to remember both of those. And there's a hidden step in here, which is it's very beneficial to be able to discern the difference between the two things. There's the internal thing, and then there's the external thing. And to be able to separate, this is what happened objectively in the world, and this was the experience that it created in me. That's just a whole deeper teaching and magic trick that helps us in our lives in many ways, of knowing like what we own as our experience, that we have some control over versus something that just happened to us. So that's kind of like a hidden step in there. So step one, remember what happened. I really want to move to step two, but we're not quite ready. So what step one really means is feeling all the pain. And this is the hard part, and this is where the Gandhi quote is really important, where forgiveness is the attribute of the brave and the strong, because nobody wants to do this. You have to feel all of the pain. There's lots of reasons why we don't want to feel pain. The main one is that it's painful. So I'm gonna help you with that. So if you're interested in this, just repeat after me. I am strong. I can handle pain. So when you don't want to do it because it's painful, remember you are strong. Yeah. And okay. The second reason, and there's probably like 10 reasons or 100 or 1,000, but I'm going to go through three. The second reason nobody wants to feel all the pain is that it involves a lot of emotion. The main ones are going to be sadness and anger. And depending on your family of origin and your like gender stereotype conditioning, you may not feel it's appropriate for you to feel one or both of those. It's not appropriate for me to feel anger. It's not appropriate for me to share tears. And I don't cry, this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you permission that it is appropriate to feel all of those emotions. It's appropriate to get really mad. It's appropriate to get really sad. It's appropriate to break down and cry if you need to do that. That it's totally appropriate for you. So I'm going to give you permission, and if you accept, say, I accept. Great. Okay. And then the third reason that people don't want to feel all the pain is that we just want to move on. And there's something a little pernicious here in the spiritual quest of just like wanting to be a little bit better than we are, or a little bit more ahead on the path than we actually are, which in general I think is a pretty good drive because it's a drive that keeps us moving forward. But it has these nasty side effects. And if you're like, oh, I just want to move on, I want to accept it, but you haven't really accepted it, it doesn't help. And the whole reason I chose this topic is I was on a bike ride with a friend, and he was talking about this relationship he had where he forgave this other person who had done all this stuff. And then he saw that person again, and they did something. And he was like, oh, turns out I never actually forgave that person for any of those things. It all just came back. And I was like, oh, yeah. And that's really likely to happen if you go too fast. And so we want to go fast. We want to be like, the spiritual guy and do all this cool stuff. But beware of the desire to move on. And so, what I get from Ken's teaching in this is you only actually forget what you really remembered. When I said forget, I meant forgive. I'll say it again. You only actually can forgive what you really remember. So the more you write down in this process of step one of feeling all the pain and remembering what happened, and then read what you wrote down, or the more painful you allow it to be in the moment, the stronger you need to be in order to do that. But the more of what happened will be included in your process of forgiveness. Does that make sense? Everything you skim over and don't really feel the pain will not actually be included in the whole forgiveness process, which means you'll have to do it later. Right? So this is like a gift you can give to your future self of like doing more of it now. Right? Okay, so now that's step one. Remember what happened, feel the pain, know why you don't want to feel the pain, and address it. Okay, so step two is almost like a parallel or a mirror image where you can imagine the other person's experience. So this is like, so you're the victim over here, and then there's like the aggressor over here, and like you know your own experience, but then you try and understand their experience. What was alive in them? You don't have to justify it. It's not like explaining that they were okay to do that. It's not about evaluating. It's just understanding what might have been going on for that person. When you do that, you may notice that there's some commonalities in your experience. You may notice that there are no commonalities in your experience. There's not a right or a wrong. But the reason we do this, and this is in Ken's language, empathy is the first casualty of conflict. First thing that happens in conflict, we sever empathy as a means of self-protection. But what's fascinating, and this is just, I just love this, that empathy is part of what makes us human. The ability to feel what's going on in ourselves and other people and to recognize that. And so when we cut empathy, what we end up doing is dehumanizing ourselves. We cut out this really important organ of ourselves. And this is maybe one of the fundamental teachings of Gandhi and nonviolence, is the reason to avoid violence internally and externally is not because of the hurt it'll happen to the other person, but because of the hurt you do to yourself. Because it's fundamentally dehumanizing ourselves and making us less capable of being who we want to be when we engage in violence. So that's like, so this is, I remember, this is really not about avoiding, it's not really about the other person. It's not about understanding the other person. It's not about justifying what the other person did. This is about our own experience. And so the point of reconnecting with the empathy is for your own experience. So step one, remember what happened. Step two, imagine the other person's experience and rebuild the empathy. And then step three, and again, this is supposed to be hard, and we have to be brave and strong, and you are brave and you are strong to do this, is to list all of the reasons, the really good reasons for not forgiving. And there's a kindness in here and a compassion for yourself, because there can be a lot of like normative judgment, a lot of shoulding, like, oh, I should have forgiven this person a long time ago. There are really good reasons why we don't forgive. And one of them is just avoiding the pain, right? That's like, it's a good reason. We don't want pain. But there might be other reasons that you have for not forgiving that person. So you got to think about all the pain, all the broken expectations, all the fear, all of what they deserve or what they don't deserve. Whatever comes up for you when you think of this, write down all of the good reasons with the sort of charity to yourself. It's not like you've just been messing up this whole time. You were like, damn right not to forgive them, right? And part of what this is going into the process with your eyes wide open. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to be the better person and forgive this person, or just kindness will rule all, but really to understand what it means to forgive by understanding what it meant to suffer everything you've suffered and why precisely you're not forgiving, right? And then step 4 is you go through the list, and for each of those good reasons not to forgive, you can either know when you read it, I can let that go, or if that's not where you are, you can evaluate and write down, this is the cost benefit analysis part, the accounting part, exactly what it costs you to hold on to that. Like, what is the price of every one of those good reasons for not forgiving? So what's interesting about this is that the price you pay is a price that you pay. The other person pays no price for that. And so it's funny, from like a math or accounting decision, it's like, I'm committing to pay this price for the rest of my life because of the hurt I received. So, the math guy is going to look at me like, oh, you should let go of all those things and you should no longer pay the price. But the heart is not made of the math guy, of course. So you have to look at it and be like, for each of these reasons, this is a good reason not to forgive. What is the price that I've been paying? And what is the price that I will continue to pay for not forgiving? And just make it really clear to yourself. Like, and it's been worth it so far. Otherwise, you would have forgiven already, right? So how long will it continue to be worth it? It's up to you. And the goal of the process is not for everyone to be like, oh, I'm just going to forgive and give up all these good reasons. Because it's about a personal evaluation of whether it's still working for you. There's not like a right answer, right? Where you come out and be like, okay, now I did the spiritual thing and I forgave. Because then you end up in that situation where, a few months later, you can be like, actually, that was too hasty. So the point is to really do an honest evaluation, right? And maybe, for every person, the price is different. Maybe it's openness to a new experience. Maybe it's a certain kind of freedom. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's positivity. Maybe it's just the way you live your life. But there's a cost. And it's good to be, again, eyes wide open, acknowledge the cost, and then determine, is it worth the price? So part of this is about it's about storytelling. So with everything that happens, there's the moment it happened, which in this case is hopefully painful if you're thinking about the right thing. And then there's every moment you reflect on that moment of pain afterwards, where you recreate that pain. And as you live your life, and I hope we've lived a long time since that original pain, the ratio is enormous. The amount of times that we've recreated that pain compared to that first original pain, 1,000 to 1, 100,000 to 1. How many times you've had that thought? Right. So the ratio is important, and that comes from the story. And so what this is also saying is like, all right, is it worth the price to keep that story, or am I ready to change that story? And again, I don't want there to be any subtle pressure that you have to be ready to change the story, because you're ready when you're ready. It's not a math problem. It's not like this is the right thing to do. Like there's things that I've done this process on because of Ken's teaching, and I do the process and I'm like, hell no. And it's not rational, but it's like, there's no way I'm going to let go of that, even though I know the price. And then there's times where something shifts and you're like, oh God, I don't want to pay that price anymore. And no one can tell you, right? No one can tell you. So step one, remember what happened and really feel the pain. Step two, do that internal healing around empathy and being able to understand and imagine the other person's experience. Step three is list all the good reasons for not doing it. And step four is understanding the price of each of those reasons, what the cost is to you. And step five, for whatever part of it you're interested in forgiving or you feel like it's the right moment, to have a sort of ritual. And the ritual is what brings the internal experience into the outside world. And if it's helpful to have other people there, that support you and care about you, or if it's helpful to have nobody there, whatever works for you as a ritual, to have a kind of performance, a before and after moment. We're like, yeah, this was the story for this time, and then I declare, performative language, things are going to change with this experience. So that's the most of it, right? It's kind of short and sweet. But just a couple of notes on that. Because it's so hard to do the first parts, it's so hard to remember all of the pain of what happened. Sometimes this is an iterative process where you can do it on a certain relationship, on a certain event, and you might get 25% of the memory, or you might be fully honest about 25% of the pain. You might be willing to forgive some amount of that, and then you might go back a couple years later, and there might be more memory or more pain that you're capable of handling, and you can do it again. So it can be an iterative process. And sometimes it's just too hard to do all at once. But the good thing about the process is that it's here for you. It doesn't go away. You can do it whenever you want. And for me, the best part of this, the real healing when I learned this process, is that the other person does not have to know. They don't have to care. They don't have to be there. They don't have to be present. They don't even have to be alive, because it's not about them. It's about you. And you can do it with your spouse. You can do it with your dog. You can do it with your parents. You can do it with Richard Nixon. You could do it with organized religion. You can do it with white supremacy. You can do it with whatever you want, because it's your life and you're the person doing the work, right? And fundamentally, to me, it's like an assertion of personal agency and control over your experience, even though you may have not have had agency or control over the original wound, right? It's like, what can I control? I can control my experience. There's a quote Ken uses. I think the author's name is Annie Lamont, which is, yeah, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. So the idea is to shift that hope from like the past changing to the future being different. So you have this area of control, and you can shift your agency to your area of control versus changing the past, which I think they do in some comic books, but it's not like super common. So it's a kind of liberation, and so just to end, I think about Jesus Christ Superstar, which is my favorite musical. And in Jesus Christ Superstar, which I think this part is actually in the original text as well, they crucify Jesus, which is my understanding. He's not dead. He's in a lot of pain, and then eventually dies. And before he dies, or doesn't die, depending on how you think the story ends, he says, "Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do." And so, if you think about this process, maybe he's had the time to go through the process. So he's up there, and he's if I, for me, the real message, this is the real message of Jesus, is forgiveness. And I see it, that when I visualize it, I see the pain turning into hatred as a kind of shadow on our hearts. And he's doing this process. He's doing this like kind of Vipassana meditation process, and he's looking at all these organs. And he sees this like shadow, this stain on his heart, and he's like, "That's not going to serve me." And he wants to purify his heart of that, in order to be truly liberated. He wants to free himself of that. And that for me is the model here of like looking at the shadows on our heart and deciding whether we want to be free from that as we move forward. And the question is like, why not set her free? Thank you.